trouble, it's not my fault. All this, I also lose my friends, I lost my baby. That is looking crack, only today want to change. He wanted us, so they couldn't try more like to feel. I just wanted to go away. You decided to stay in the well. I want to be forgiven, I don't like this kid for money. Sorry I was scared, you're not the way it feels. Like to sleep waiting for someone to come in and kill you. The final thing is that now we're not friends of anything. Go they gonna kill anyone that feels so powerful. They try to do every new skin of everything is confusing. You will be good, but you will be more. You will be good, but you will be more. You will be good, but you will be more. Alone every day, it is a praise of pleasure.
Good morning and welcome to Dynasty 365, where the film will set you free. We're not going to be doing a situational analysis of a player today. We will get back to that tomorrow. But today we're going to be talking about Dynasty decision-making methods. I'll go over the 4 different methods common in decision-making in general and explain how they correlate to Dynasty and the types of players that make those decisions, the pros and cons of each method, and which method I prefer and believe is ultimately superior. The first method is what first-year players and casual Dynasty players do. Random choice decision-making. This would be blindly following the Fantasy Pros consensus ranking, finding a new website and using their rankings. I say new website even though I do have one, but it's applicable because there's no historical record of success, so you really can't trust that ranking. And also, when you only use average draft position and just pick whoever the next highest player is by ADP. These aren't all first-year players and all casual Dynasty players, but these are the players that don't do any film watching, don't have any predictive metrics knowledge or predictive analytics models that they follow, and they don't understand the importance of draft capital or what draft capital means. Random choice decision-making has minimal consequences to you because you can blame the website, you can blame the ADP, you can blame something else besides yourself when that pick doesn't work out. It's good for when you have limited time. Say you're busy or you're just disinterested at a fundamental level about Dynasty Fantasy Football. You got roped into a league, you're new to it, you don't quite know where to start. You're most likely going to use random choice decision-making even if you aren't aware of it. That ties into the third characteristic of this method is that you don't know any other strategies to make your decisions. The pro of this method is that it's fast and simple. The con is that you have zero control over your outcome. Me, I like to have control over my Dynasty team. That's why I play Dynasty. But I do understand that first-year players just might not have the knowledge or the expertise. Actually, I would argue that all first-year players in Dynasty don't have the knowledge or the expertise to use another decision-making method. But in the long run, you play Dynasty to have control over your team. If you're blindly following ADP, a ranking system, or Fantasy Pros, you are removing all responsibility off of yourself for that decision. It's going to be faster. You don't have to spend as much time, which is one of the fundamental parts of my podcast. I know people don't have time to watch all the film. I know most people don't have the expertise to watch the film. And I'm right now actively, essentially arguing against using my own ranking system that I'm trying to sell at a surface level. Really, I believe there's more value in what I am selling in just decreasing the amount of time it takes you to learn other decision-making methods to new players, and I do think it's going to be far superior than using Fantasy Pros because of my decision-making method that I use, but we'll get to that later. But ultimately, the other 3 methods rarely need to use this random choice method, except for when you have a tiebreaker in your ranks between 2 players. You're not sure which position you want to pick, running back or wide receiver, so you flip a coin to decide. Or if you woke up late, you've got 5 minutes on the clock, you haven't done your proper research, you just have to make a random choice. It's better than getting your pick skipped, but ultimately probably not ideal, and I'd say that's an understatement. The second method of decision-making is the analytical decision-making method. To me, this would be using solely playerprofiler.com or the Roto Underworld podcast to make your decision. A predictive analytics model, so essentially the quote-unquote metrics guys. This is what the metrics guys use to make their dynasty decisions. For the analytical decision-making method to be utilized, it needs all relevant information to the situation to be at your disposal. So think about that. How often in Dynasty, at a rookie draft, do you have all of the relevant information upon which to make a decision? I would argue that that never happens, but just to make sure my words are historically correct, I would say that rarely happens, where before the rookie draft, you have all of the relevant information you need to make your decision with numbers. The information at your disposal has to be objective and easily observed. We've talked multiple times about how inaccurate the combine testing actually is. So right there, we don't have objective info, and without watching the film frame by frame, it's not easily observed. There's also a bias with watching the film. So when you apply a numerical grade to a player, like PFF does, all you're doing is quantifying the bias of the person or persons that have whole different life stories, a whole different range of expertise. Some could be brand new to the company, some could have been there a while. So that number, that film grade, even though it's a number, there's still film watching subjective bias in there. So that doesn't fit the objective information or easily observed. The predictive analytics models definitely have more objective info and, I guess, easily observed information, but the actual algorithm used to make those models are quite complex mathematically, and I doubt most people have the mathematical expertise to really truly comprehend what that regression tree or whatever predictive model they're using. I doubt they have the capacity to understand the math behind it. Now, that's not a knock on anyone for not knowing math. Some people just studied math. Some people studied physical therapy. I don't know how to set a broken ankle, but there are plenty of people that do. The third characteristic of the analytical method, which is appealing to most inexperienced Dynasty players and multi-year Dynasty players, is that it breaks up a complex decision into small, easy to understand and quantify pieces. That makes sense. The combine is a proxy for how athletic these people are on film. And if you don't know what a proxy is, it's just a number that represents the real number, but it's not quite the real number. An example would be the NASDAQ. It's an average price of a bunch of tech companies, but it doesn't truly show all tech companies in the world or in America. It's a proxy. To me, that's what the combine is for the athletic capabilities on film. It's an incomplete proxy. But those 6 numbers are a lot easier to understand than learning how to watch film correctly and trying to gauge players' athletic capabilities using the film. That's also why PFF is so popular, because it takes a subjective, hard-to-do thing and gives it a 1-number grade. Same with Matt Waldman, and his process is it's easier to understand when he assigns a numerical grade. Our brains just like comparing that one number to another number. It's easier for us to do than subjective comparisons against multiple players. Now, I'm not talking shit about any of these sites because tons of people love them. They're probably always going to be more popular than my style of decision making because most people, to be frank, don't really understand math or proper decision making options. So they gravitate towards something that they believe is quantifiable, even though in reality it is not. The pros of the analytical method are that people love numbers and it helps you to make easy, quick decisions. The cons of these methods are that it disregards outliers, which means a data point that doesn't fit history, like Philip Lindsay, and that the first requirement is that you need all relevant information to the situation. I find it impossible to have all of the relevant information that you need at your disposal at the time of the rookie draft. These teams know way more about these guys than we do. We can use draft capital as a proxy, but it's not an absolute objective knowledge piece of information that we have. I go back to the human element in the combine testing. Not all players run every drill. They're not required to. Those times are also inaccurate. So I don't see how it's possible for this method to be the optimal method when making dynasty decisions. And with the PFF grade, it is a proxy for overall player skill, but it doesn't really tell you which areas of skill the player truly possesses. I know they have subcategories of different areas, but at the end of the day, there's still a subjective element that they're attempting to quantify, but a lot of people treat those as gospel just because it's a number, and their brain likes to compare two numbers because it's easier than having deep thought. The third decision-making method is a heuristic decision-making method, also known as gut feeling. So this would be experienced Dynasty players, and when I say experienced, I mean 3 to 5 years of experience, and these players know about the predictive metrics that are important. They have watched film, they know a little about watching film, they know which combinations of traits have resulted in successful prospect hits and prospect busts based on their experience playing Dynasty. The characteristics of this method are that you don't have all of the information, but you have a mix of information and experience. Examples would be knowing that route running is important for wide receivers, that the 40 time is overrated and shouldn't be the only proxy, we're going to be saying that word a lot, that you use when selecting a player. Knowing to avoid completely unskilled players in the first round. Understanding how a player will fit on a team. Those are all examples of having information at your disposal and experience based on Dynasty results, but also being aware that you don't have all of the information. This method doesn't work all the time, but it works often enough to trust in many situations, avoiding low draft capital players, slow and unathletic running backs, and poor scheme fits. So those are pretty generally good rules. It doesn't work all the time, but it works enough to be kind of a loose rule in Dynasty. The third characteristic for this method is that there shouldn't be great consequences for being wrong. Well, that depends on how much you want to win at Dynasty and win a Dynasty championship. It depends on how much money you have in that league, how important winning is to you, and how much you really want to hit on your rookie draft picks every time you pick. I hate to waste any rookie draft pick. To me, it's money that could be traded even in a package for an established player. So wasting that draft pick is wasting money that I could spend to get a really good player. To me, this approach is not good enough for my standards. If you use this approach and miss on all your picks, or pick for long-term production instead of short-term production, that's no championship for you. I play this game to win championships. This gut feeling method is also used quite often, probably most often, when picking up and dropping guys from the waivers. A lot of people get a gut feel about a player, they popped in preseason, they had one big game, and they drop a guy that they should be patient with to pick up this 3-week flash in the pan and lose out on a lot of value. In Dynasty, these decisions last for forever. So when one of the requirements for this method is that there shouldn't be great consequences, I don't like this method. I don't think it's the optimal method for Dynasty. The pros of this method are that it's simple, fast, and can even become subconscious with enough practice. That would be years of Dynasty playing experience, number of leagues you're in, draft picks you've taken, seeing how they do on your team. That's where you get that gut feeling. This method isn't even really possible for Dynasty players that haven't played 2 or 3 years. They haven't even played long enough to develop the experience necessary to use this method. So you're either relying on random choice, which is blindly following rankings, or the analytical, which is using numbers. And I think I've fairly well dissected why those two aren't very good or optimal for Dynasty decision making long term. The cons of this method are a false sense of security. I would argue that this is most of the Dynasty community. People are so confident in their guys. Now, I have my guys, and I do have confidence in my methods, but I don't believe I use a heuristic approach in my process. People that use this method might also rely on the wrong cues to guide their decisions, the wrong gut feelings. That could be overemphasizing certain traits, like route running for wide receivers that you can see on film right now, hands catches, all sorts of different things. There's a ton of different traits you could overemphasize. You could be relying on metrics more than traits, or traits more than metrics. You could be relying on draft capital too much or not enough. Same with landing spot, and same with the school they went to, the conference they played in, and the level of competition they faced. If you have an imbalance of these, and you're relying on the wrong ones to guide your decisions, that could give you a false sense of security and ultimately lead you to make a suboptimal choice. The fourth method of making dynasty decisions is the expertise method. This is a method that I believe, truly, I utilize. I am sure that there are other dynasty experts that utilize this method. I honestly do not know of one that has a podcast, and I've listened to all of them that I know of, and that's the reason I made this podcast. I don't believe there is a dynasty expert on a podcast using the expertise method as it sits today. If you want to talk about the draft, Matt Waldman would be someone that most likely uses the expertise method more than the analytical method, but probably understands or subconsciously understands that people love to see that number. They love that number, which is why he comes out with an overall numerical grade. I don't know. That's just a feeling I have. And again, I've got a ton of respect for Matt Waldman, but I don't think he specifically focuses on dynasty. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's go through the 3 traits of the expertise method. It relies on your expertise and competence in an area. For myself personally, I'd say I have extreme competence in removing emotion from making decisions and observations. I've been fascinated with math, science, and decision making my entire life that I can remember. I've seen firsthand, as many have, how emotions typically lead to worse decisions than when you, at the very least, attempt to remove it, but hopefully do remove emotion from that decision. I also believe I have expertise and competence in watching film. When I was trying to improve as a football player, that was how I learned football best. It was much easier for me personally to see what happened on film and adjust than trying to understand the verbiage that a coach was trying to impart upon me in a 5-minute session during practice. For my playing career, the film is what I relied on. I'm not trying to brag at all, only explain my background. I'm not proud of the result and certain things I did during my college career, but I am proud that I had a college career playing football and truly believes that assists me when making dynasty decisions. During 5 years of football, year-round, we'd watch film probably 5 days a week on average. I put in thousands of hours watching football analytically during college. Probably more time, actually definitely more time, than I spent doing homework or going to class. Watching the film and learning football was priority 1 in college for me. After college, that's when I discovered Dynasty. I've now put thousands of hours into watching rookies after already having thousands of hours of college film watching and applied what I learned there to this new arena of evaluating rookies and NFL teams through watching film. I've also actually held a paying job doing predictive analytics, actually being the person that makes predictive analytics models, studying how they work. I did learn in college. I didn't do all the homework, didn't go to all the classes, but I did learn the material, especially the mathematics, which helped me to understand how these predictive models work. And while working with them firsthand, trying to apply them to real-world situations, you soon realize predictive models don't apply very well to most real-world situations. For example, when you have a predictive model, say predicting how well a running back will fare in the NFL, all that needs to happen is the addition of one new variable that did not exist in the prior years, and that model does not work anymore. All of those predictive metrics do not work anymore. As a specific example, let's say I made a model doing just that, predicting how running backs are going to fare in the NFL using all these measurements, all these objective, numerical pieces of information. This year, the NFL creates a new rule that there's only going to be 10 defenders on defense from now on. They're taking one defender off the field to increase scoring. Well, I think everyone would agree that's a significant variable. Now, that predictive model is completely incorrect. If you want a real-world example, look at the predictive polling models for the 2016 election. A new variable was introduced that threw off polling models that had worked for 20, 30, 40 years. Another limitation of predictive analytics models is that they fail to include outliers. This means you're not going to evaluate those players that do not fit in the high percent of success rate bucket. For some people, that's fine because they don't want to take the time to do the expertise or heuristic analysis, and they just want the analytical analysis method. When you fail to include outliers, you fail to include players like Philip Lindsay. Too small of hands, too small of BMI, too light overall, all these things. I guarantee you, no predictive model had Philip Lindsay as a high probability of success. Undrafted, plus all the things I just mentioned, going to a team that had just invested a 3rd-round pick into a running back. You are also going to exclude players with low college production, such as Mecole Hardman, Riley Ridley. If you don't watch the film and don't understand the football schemes due to a lack of expertise and competency, you could be making a suboptimal decision by removing those players from your available pool of players. You will also be removing players with low draft capital, such as Philip Lindsay, Kelvin Harmon, Divine Ozigbo, Elijah Holyfield, Adam Thielen. By the definition of an outlier, you're not going to be missing a large number of players by excluding the outliers, but you will be missing some players and as a result making suboptimal decisions. The second characteristic of the expertise method is that you know so much about something and have enough experience that most decisions are intuitive. So for watching film, is this guy fast or slow? Is he agile? Is he strong? Is he skilled in route running? I don't need to look up a chart when I watch the film to have an intuitive feel for that. I'm sure Matt Harmon doesn't either. He uses intuition and experience to then make a determination on the player, not the other way around. He's not using a numerical chart to grade that route. It's simply impossible. Another thing that adds to this point is knowing the overall amount of players in the NFL with intimacy and their skill levels and which teams they're on, where did they move to. I know that was a big adjustment for me going from fantasy to dynasty. And still, there's areas I can improve. I need to get better with offensive linemen. I need to find a way to be able to scout more defensive players than I did this year. But it does help having several years of watching the film of these players, learning them, so that when a new player is added, I don't have to take forever looking up how good that team is. I look it up because I know you guys want that number, that ranking. Were they third in pass attempts or 19th? In my head, I might know they're a low passing volume offense, but people love those numbers. Also, the team play styles and tendencies are in addition to that. If you don't watch the film of the NFL games, I don't really know how you're going to learn which offensive coordinators call which plays, which head coaches are going to go for it on fourth, which ones will play undrafted guys over first-round picks, which teams where the owners make all the decisions, the ones where the coach is allowed to do whatever he wants. Those are all just things that come with experience and time that allow me to make a quicker, intuitive decision without spending the time looking up stats. The third characteristic of this method is that it works well when you have enough experience in an area and understand the heuristics as well, the gut feeling. So for me, my example would be watching tight ends. I've played tight end, I played against tight ends, I've had good success drafting tight ends in my dynasty leagues, so I've got a lot of real world experience in that area, film watching experience with that area, and understand when to listen to my gut. My gut tells me Kahale Warring is going to be a fantasy goldmine. Same with Mecole Hardman. I know it's a different position, but I've got the experience at this point to watch the film and combine that with that little bit of emotion that does creep in my stomach, that doubt of, man, should you really have TJ Hawkinson over him? And I could not ignore the gut feeling that no, Warring needs to be over Hawkinson. The pros of this method is that it's pretty fast after you get enough experience, and it's the result of many accurate decisions that take place on a subconscious level. Examples of this would be ranking the pre-draft players. That's why it's so important to me, is to hone this expertise and balance of the expertise method with the gut feeling to get a ranking system for my overall talent and initial production potential ranks. It's also for predicting if a rookie is going to beat out a veteran and when he's going to do that. One example last year where I had success was not thinking that Rashad Penny was going to be refined enough to overtake Chris Carson, which turned out to be correct. And this year, my prediction is that Miles Sanders, at best, has a 50-50 split with Jordan Howard. I don't think they traded for him and aren't going to use him. And I don't think Miles Sanders is good enough at playing running back the way you need to in the NFL right now to completely beat him out. Same with Devin Singletary. Frank Gore is too consistent. LaShawn McCoy is a veteran. I don't think Singletary is going to beat them out. The cons of using this method are that it's hard to teach. Things that I may see as obvious will be seen as difficult or a hot take to others. Things that are just completely obvious to me seem like absolute blasphemy to people that use one of the three other decision-making methods. I don't blame them for that, but one of my goals in this podcast is to help teach you how to use the expertise decision-making method when you make your dynasty decisions. Another con to this method is that without self-awareness or overconfidence, it can make someone think they're an expert in all areas. So for me personally, I would say the positions I'm best at in order are running back, then tight end, then quarterback, and far down the list is wide receiver. I still think I'm pretty good at wide receiver, but I would say running back is my sweet spot, tight end is pretty close to it, and quarterback is closer to tight end than wide receiver when it comes to my confidence in my abilities. But I'm aware of which positions I'm better or worse at, and apply a lower certainty level to wide receivers than say I would a running back. I do think a thing that has helped me understand I'm not an expert in all areas, but also have a good base to analyze all these different positions, is the experience I've had playing these positions, playing against these positions, analyzing them on film in college and at the Dynasty level. I don't ever assert that I'm perfect or that my ranks are infallible. Anyone who says that is a fucking moron and should never be listened to. There's a lot of hot take artists out there. I'm not one of them. No matter how much you disagree with me, I'm just using my method, my process, and let the chips fall where they may. All I'm trying to do is reduce uncertainty in your decision-making ability, take smart risks, and hopefully teach you the expertise decision-making method. Now, the way this method is evaluated is by the results. That's why I track my own predictions. I only care about fantasy points and career length. Do not care about anything else because this method is shown to be valid or invalid by the results. On your Dynasty team, those are the only results that matter to me and probably to you. How many fantasy points are they going to get per game, per season, and how long will their career be? Those are all I care about when it comes to evaluating my method. It's also why I welcome accuracy predictions in competition against other podcasts and paid Dynasty resources out there right now. If I lose, that just means I have an area of my process to improve. If I win, I know I'm on the right track, but there's always something to improve. There's always a way to get better. I've never claimed to be perfect, but I do believe in my process. I hope a breakdown of those 4 decision-making methods is something that you'll think about when you make your decisions in the future. And even right now, go back and think about which method you used in Dynasty to make decisions during your rookie draft, the startup draft, and figure out which one you want to use. My guess is that you're going to want to use the 4th method, or at least the 3rd method. Hopefully I've convinced you of that at least. Again, tomorrow is going to be another player situational breakdown, but the happy song of the day today is Under Pressure by Queen and David Bowie. The football song of the day is probably my favorite football song of all time, Kill 'Em All by Twista, and the links for those YouTube videos are in the episode description as always. Wanted to give a special shout out to my newest Patreon, Jamie, who just joined today, so thanks Jamie, I appreciate it. You've been listening to Dynasty 365, where the film will set you free.
So much trouble, it's not my fault, all this I also lost my friends, I lost my baby that is smoking crack, only today want to change. He wanted us on the cookie to try more like to feel. I'd scale the bill, take your life in a second. The devil drinks coffee in my kitchen, I mentioned in every song, I just wanted to go away. You decide to stay in the well. I want to be forgiven, I don't like this kid for money. Sorry I was scared, you're not the way it feels. Like to sleep waiting for someone to come in and kill you. The final thing is stop now, I'm not afraid of anything. Go they gonna kill anyone that feels so powerful. They trip by you, I read your skin of everything is confusing. Your will for good, but